it's a shame that this is the mentality of an 8-year-old when the cops aren't being held accountable. Police profiled me. They followed me in the back of my house, harassing me. Um, Once I pulled over in my driveway, I stuck my hands out the window with my wallet. Police proceeded to violently and hostilely approach my van with me and my son in it. As I announced, this was my home, wallet in hand, uh, guns drawn. Once they reached my vehicle, they violently pulled me out, ramshacked my vehicle with my 3-year-old son strapped in his car seat, threw me against the gate, slammed me repeatedly. Once they slammed me repeatedly and I was not able to move normally, they handcuffed me. Once they handcuffed me, they demanded me on my stomach before I even had a chance to roll over on my stomach. One of the officers picked me up as I'm handcuffed. I asked him to spare me, and he proceeded to drop me on my head as well as my shoulder. This all happened in front of anywhere in between 15 to 25 witnesses, all my neighbors, for over 10 years. They came out and advocated for me. They actually are the people that saved my life, I believe, as well as my son. Had they not come, I believe the officers would have did further damage. I demanded that I demanded and requested that my neighbors call additional police to police the officers that were there, so that we could have some law enforcement, hold other law enforcement accountable for my life and the life of my son. After they dropped me on my head, they proceeded to put me in a hog-tied position and shackle my feet to my wrists. Once they did that, they did all this while I'm screaming for mercy, and my son is in the van. My neighbors were there, like I said, between 15 and 25 neighbors, all in between the ages of 8 to 80. Once the officers found that the neighbors were advocating for me, they demanded that my neighbors leave, and even threatened their freedom, several of their freedoms, if they did not leave. And to add insult to injury, literally, once I was arrested, I had no idea what I was being arrested for. Uh, the officers notified me that if my wife did not arrive on the scene within 15 minutes, that they would take my son to DSS. Um, I notified them that I work with DSS. I have a contract for mentor and advocacy with DSS, Baltimore City, PG County, and Baltimore County. I work with the Department of Labor. I work in the community. I notified them of all of these things, and I notified them that my neighbors are very familiar with my son, that they had no right to take my son. Once we went to the hospital, these same officers came to the hospital and harassed me in the hospital, in my hospital bed, as I was getting x-rayed, and all of my injuries were being checked out. Internal Affairs did show and took several pictures, so I hope they do have the pictures. And my son is scarred to this day. He remembers the incident as it happened yesterday. When he talks about it, he always refers to daddy being on the floor with police yesterday. My son is terrified to ride in the car without seatbelts, as the officers use this as an excuse as why they pulled me over, and I had my seatbelt on. My son is terrified to ride in the car without a seatbelt, without his seatbelt, or anybody else having their seatbelt on. My son is terrified of police, and this is why we will continue to fight for this struggle for civilian rights and against police brutality. They tore open the groceries, threw.
Mic check, mic check. So that was a very short preview of a film that's being put together by the West Coalition. Um, Uncle Bill is doing amazing work putting this video together, and a lot of different people are contributing different films to it. This is West Wednesday number 737, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tawanda at this time. Mic check, mic check.
Thank you so much. So as my brother Ben was saying, this is West Wednesday, week 373, and and as he was stating that we're putting together a video, and you guys don't want to missed this video. It's sad and it's unfortunate, but the guy that just spoke that we heard, Abdul Salam, just to know that this man, this was one of the many victims, right, that were terrorized right before my brother Tyrone West was brutally executed. An unarmed black man driving a Mercedes Benz, and he was killed for no reason other than driving while black. That's the only reason why he was murdered, driving while black. So I said all this to say that we will continuously fight for accountability, not just for my brother, but for all the victims of police brutality. And we have quite a few special guests, and we're basically right now trying to break down this blue wall of silence. And to me, that's more deadlier than what these officers are doing. Because if you're a good officer in any fashion, shape, or form, you need to basically tell when somebody is not doing something right. You need to, why have them make you look bad if you're a good officer? So that's always been my stance on it. And we will continuously fight for my brother Tyrone West, but not just for him, but for all the victims of police brutality and of murder. And right now, I just want to say that our city is really hurting because last week we had over 58 shootings. And this ain't had nothing to do with police brutality, but it's just horrible to live in a city where you're not even safe. And it's just sad. And if you notice that all the shootings that are taking place are basically in the black community. Let's be real. Let's look at all the victims now that's in my city and basically worldwide. This is a problem that needs to stop, and we're just here to say that we are going to continuously fight, but this is not something that one person can do. This is our fight. Together we will win. But tonight, I'm honored to bring on first my best friend. She's my childhood friend. We actually grew up together from kindergarten, like up to this point. And she is a certified life coach, and she's going to offer us some words of encouragement and just basically what to do in this type of times that we're in now. Like we got the pandemic going on, we got all these steps, the violence that's going on. It's just way too much. Police brutality is at an all-time level, like it's always been. But the difference now is you can actually see it because the media shows it to you over and over again. So, no further ado, because I respect my friend time. I'm going to bring on Mrs. Kara. Um, so yeah, Kara Devon, welcome. And thank you for coming on.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. And it's Miss Kira Devon. I just wanted to talk to everyone just really quickly about self-care and intentional healing. It's so many of us that are hurting, that are in pain, that are grieving, and sometimes we just don't know what to do. So I just wanted to just jump on and just tell everybody that even in the midst of your pain, in the midst of your grieving, and in the midst of hurting, that it's okay to say that you need help. So many times we don't want to admit that we need help, or we say we'll be okay, or we are okay when someone asks us how we're doing. It's okay to say we need help. And I just want to suggest just a few things to help us move along. I want to first say that it's okay to get counseling, whether it be, bereavement counseling, whether you talk to a psychologist, whether you even talk to a life coach to help you get back on track. It's okay to have someone to keep you accountable for you and for your self care. Especially if you have children, it's imperative that they see you doing well so that they can do well. And just like Tawanda was saying, right now we're going through so much from police brutality, the pandemic, along with all the other things that were already happening in society before the pandemic even hit. And it's just really important for us to take care of us as well. So just a few tips for you guys to just kind of get through and just start taking the steps to try to improve you, for you first, and then for your families and for your children. So the first thing I would like is for us. When I say us, I mean all of us, because all of us have been going through something. All of us have experienced some type of trauma or pain. Admit how it made you feel. That's okay. To admit how it made you feel. And then the next is to remember that, people always talk about self-care, and a lot of times they think it's pampering or buying something, when in actuality, self-care starts within. So you need to make sure that your emotional state is right, spiritually, and, physically, even financially. Those things need to come together in order for you to ultimately be okay. And I also want to remind people to, it's okay to forgive yourself, forgive other people. I know so many times we, witness somebody doing something wrong, either to us or to somebody that we love or somebody that, we care about. And forgiveness is important so that you don't carry that sickness around with you. Take some time to reflect on the things that you would like to do. And, a lot of times, especially nowadays, our children are in the house. We can't really go anywhere but to school and home. So check in on each other, check in on, your family members, and just see if somebody needs anything. Our communities forgot how to be there for each other. And I think that's a huge missing link, us being there for each other. And to just also, the last thing is just to remember that we all have purpose. As long as we have a pulse, we have purpose and we can help the next person. So that's just pretty much my take on it. But I know, I can't really put myself in anybody else's shoes, but I walk with Tawanda through this journey of Tyrone. And for me, it's painful. So I can imagine how she feels. But I know that she's doing her part. And so when I say there's purpose in your pulse, I mean that there's purpose in your pulse because she's still here and she's still fighting, not just for him, but as she always says, for all victims of police brutality. So just take a note and a page from her book when it's time for you to get up and when you feel like you don't. Just take a look at her and see exactly how she's moving and what she's doing and the strength that she has. That's what I do when I don't want to do anything or when I feel like I don't want to, or when I feel like I want to give up. I have no reason to because I have somebody that I hold accountable or somebody that I can look at for strength. So that's all I want to say. And thank you guys so much for having me. It's definitely an honor and a pleasure. I wish I could stay longer, but I will be watching from behind the scenes. So thank you all so much and just have a wonderful evening and everybody stay blessed.
Yeah, so and I want to thank you too, Kara, because I ain't never in my life called you Miss, so that's why I got the whole Miss phone up.
We will talk about it later for sure.
You already know how we do, but yeah, thank you just for everything. Like, and literally, like, she grew up with, she knew my brother personally. Like, he
Yeah.
used to run me in the house. We knew that when them street lights came on, what time it was? It was time for us to leave the premises. ASAP.
Absolutely.
No
I
questions
always
asked.
I always say that Tyrone, he was our protector, and he always sent us to the corner store to get whatever we wanted. So, this it's a big deal, and it's even hard for me to watch these videos and stuff because I can't imagine. And just real quick, I just want to share this. Before he passed away, we had him and I had a conversation and we were going to plan this huge reunion with all of the people that we grew up with, and we were going to have crabs and all the fun Baltimore food, and that memory will always be in my mind because it was one of the last conversations that we had that was because I lived in Georgia I still live in Georgia, but I lived in Georgia at the time, and we were planning it actually, and then that happened. So um, yeah, yeah.
Well, again, thank you, best friend, for those encouraging words. And I just always looked up to her because even when it happened, she was one of the first ones that recommended that I went to counseling. At first, I'm thinking like, I don't need counseling. I'm not crazy. A lot of folks associate counseling with being screws, being missing, things of that nature. But it was really helpful. Like it was so healing. It was to the point something that I didn't want to join. I wind up didn't even want to leave it. Like I'm like the 8 weeks are up this last, like I did not want to leave Roberta's house. So I thank you for those encouraging words and being a best friend and saying, hey, best friend, there's nothing wrong with getting counseling. I thank you for just being there and, for your thing. And real quick, do anybody got a question for Kim? Because she definitely has another thing she has to jump in real quick. Mic check.
It took me a minute to hit my microphone. I just wanted to ask you how long grief usually lasts.
Forever, because you know that you won't get that person back. So while it might not be as heavy as, it once was, it goes back and forth. And it's okay for people to say, this is how I'm feeling this day. Let me just sit in it for a minute. But you can't let it take over your life and stop you from living and fulfilling your purpose. So I would say it lasts forever because you're never going to get that person back physically.
Absolutely. So anybody else real quick, because I'm definitely gonna let her go and then I'm gonna bring my next guest up because I respect his time as well. And I know he has something that he has to do as well. So
Well, and I didn't have really a question. I just wanted to thank Kira for coming here tonight because there's so many people out there that she touched, myself included, and we just need more people saying those kind of things that she's talking about. About finding purpose in our life and really deeply caring about ourselves first, and so that we can be there to help others. And the sense of cooperation and brother and sisterhood is so important too. That we have to keep remembering that we're there for each other, right? We only
Yeah.
have that's all we have.
Yeah. And that's one real quick, that's what community is about. I remember when we were younger, oh my goodness, we knew our neighbors, we knew, you know, Tawanda and I were all together every single day. And whether we were at her house, her grandmother's house, my house, her aunt's house, it was all in the neighborhood. It was all, everybody was a community. Everybody looked out for each other. When my mother bought me something, she bought Tawanda something. So we don't have that anymore. And it's sad, but we can find ways to connect and reconnect. And I hope people realizes that, especially in these times, because during these times it was meant for us to pause and see exactly what's going on in this world and how we can change, whether we, change ourselves, change how we, do things, change our attitude about certain things. But it's time for change and it's time for us to be held accountable for ourselves, hold each other accountable. And, like again, Tawanda says, these police officers need to be held accountable. And, I don't know if I'm stepping over boundaries, but please, everybody vote because you already see what's going on. So please vote. Thank you.
yeah, it ain't no boundaries. We encourage everybody to vote. It ain't no say whatever you want to say. Right? As long as we respect each other. We attack the issue, not each other. You can say whatever you want to say. And I encourage people to vote myself. So thanks for those encouraging words though. Again, I thank you again and we'll definitely be in touch.
For
So
sure. Thank you. Love you all. Have a good night.
love you too. And just like my best friend just said, it's that community, it's that whole village that raised that one child type thing. We really need to go back to that. I remember literally just like, we couldn't even say bad words in front of the church, but yeah, you had people going inside of a church, shooting the whole church up and everybody in it. It's just hope, like, if you would actually walk down the street, you get what I'm saying, and you would actually mutter a bad word, you'd be like, oh my goodness, God forgive me. Like you would literally almost drop to your knees in the street. But now we don't have that anymore. And I remember being with my best friend one time, and I called myself because I wasn't allowed to do the cheering and the shaking and the vibrating and all that stuff. So I said, well, let me go around the corner where my grandmother and them at, and they're not going to be able to witness this. So I was cheering and I was shaking and giving it up. And I just remember out the blue, one of my uncles came and like as soon as I spent and was shaking and all this foolishness, he jacked me up. And I'm like, how in the world he knew I was there? But it was that neighbor that actually knew me, right? Knew my grandmother, got on that phone, called her up, and said, look, I don't know what's going on with Tawanda today, but she out here doing some foolishness. And my uncle actually embarrassed me, took me home, and I think I got grounded for like 2 weeks. But I said all that to say that that's where we need to go back to. You get what I'm saying? We need to go back to the good old days. And and speaking of the good old days and just moving forward on a good note, I'm gonna bring this other good brother, Mr. Fred Jackson. And it's funny how, you'll talk to somebody, you'll be in communication. And when he was on a survey review board, I was actually talking to this brother. He was like pouring into me and giving me tips on how to fight for my brother. And then recently, me and him both were placed in a town hall meeting together talking. And I'm in my mind like, I wonder if this voice sounds familiar. I wonder if that's Mr. Fred. So as I went and I'm telling the lady on the panel, like, well, give him my number. The whole time I already had his number. So I text him like, Fred, was me and you just on a panel together? Because it had been a minute since I spoke to him. We used to talk like a lot, and he gave me a lot of great tips. And he was really trying to fight for my brother Tyrone West. So no further ado, I want to give it up. And this brother wears many caps. I want to give it up and respect Mr. Fred Jackson's time. So I'm going to bring Mr. Fred Jackson up right now. Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
Check.
Hello?
Hey.
Okay, am I on there now?
Yep,
Yeah,
you're good. Go ahead.
Okay. How you doing? My name is Fred Jackson, and I'm retired from the Baltimore City Sheriff's Office, and I've done just about every job that they have down there, except for the accounting. They didn't want me near the money. That's fine, because I didn't want to be near the money. I've supervised almost every section down there. And believe me, I know the trouble that the city is having with its police officers. I was born here. I went to school here. I went to work here. I retired and I'm still here. So my heart is here in the city. So when I'm speaking about what I think or what I do, I feel I have a right to do it, just coming from the standpoint of where I am. I always heard police officers talk about how hard their job is. I approached this job differently. I didn't become a police officer because I wanted to be the police. I became a police officer because I wanted to be a father and a husband and to care for my family. And I needed a job that I could do, that I felt I could be good at. And that's how I wound up here, because I started in corrections and I left that to go into law enforcement. When I first went in there, I can't remember what year it was that it happened, but soon after I'd gotten there, we had Rodney King. I saw that and I said, how can this happen? This is just horrific. Things have been happening all along up to then, but that happened. Then later on, more people were killed. Two of the biggest incidents that affected me was when Michael Brown was killed and when Tyrone West was killed. These were two black men just being black men. And when Eric Garner was killed. These three guys had something in common. They were all black and they were all big black men. For some reason or another, the police are terrified of black men who are large. If you're a large black man, you're a threat to them just by showing up. They've already weaponized your race. Now they're going to weaponize your size. Tyrone West, from everything I heard about him and from all the stuff I read about him, he was a gentle giant. He was not a threat to these guys. And even if, giving benefit of the doubt, if he had done everything they said he did, if they had let him run on the way, run down the street and go ahead, I believe just from listening to his family and the people that knew him, he would have came down there and turned himself in if he had done something. And if he did do something and they needed him, they could have found him. They did not have to sit on top of that man. They did not have to do what they did. And he died. As soon as I saw the video from that, I knew that he died from positional asphyxiation. It's one of the first things they teach you not to do to a person if you're going to put them under arrest. And many times that I've shown up on the scene of different altercations or crimes and deputies have arrested somebody, and if they have them laying face down, got to immediately set that man up. Well, he's under arrest. Yes, he's under arrest, not under torture. Set him up. There's no reason to have him down that way. And officers don't want to learn that. And that's one of the things I used to try to press is if you're doing the last thing you can do and you're doing that first, something's wrong. There is absolutely no, police officers should not have to draw their weapons as much as they do. To pull a gun out on somebody when you show up and then you find out you're wrong, you got a choice. You either shoot it or put it away. And for some reason or another, the police just don't want to put them away. I can't understand it. I've never been able to understand it. And in 2014, when I retired, I came in like I had been running a marathon. I took my retirement badge, I threw it in a drawer. I don't think I've seen it again since. And I turned my back on the profession because it was just too much. When the opportunity came up for me to go to the Civilian Review Board, I said, well, I'll do something. But I didn't want to be a cop anymore. I don't even want to be a security guard. So I go to work for the Civilian Review Board, and I heard so much garbage coming through there. The things the police were doing to people and being ridiculous about it. And then the police officers who came to the room to watch those hearings and those meetings that we were in, they were angry with me. They weren't angry with everybody else. They figured, well, they got a reason to be here, but you don't. You used to be one of us. No, not like that. I was a cop, but no, not like that. And there's been many times I am not pro-police and I'm not anti-police. I'm pro-community. I feel like if the police were part of the community, that they would treat it different. If they lived here, they would act different. There's too many of them that don't live here, and there's too many of them that go across the Pennsylvania line. They come here, make their money, and then they go there. That gives them an opportunity in the morning when they get up and put their uniform on. When I put my uniform on in the morning and stepped outside, I step out into where I'm going to be. All right, let me go take care of the city. They step outside and say, oh, great, I got to go down here into this city. I'm not escaping from anything because there's nothing to escape from. This is where I belong. I am a citizen, just a regular, ordinary citizen now, and I'm enjoying the peace and tranquility that that gives me. As dangerous as Baltimore City is, I still feel it's a beautiful place worth saving. Now, unfortunately, tomorrow's going to be my last meeting with the CRB. My term will be up then. So there's other things I'm going to have to be looking into to do. But I really feel that the police can do a better job. And even with what happened with Breonna Taylor, with the settlement that their city gave them, and all of the things that they're going to do with their police department to try to fix the problem, I think that's great. I think we need to do it here before we get a Breonna Taylor here. But we've had enough people here shot, killed, and stomped on that it's way beyond time for us to reallocate our resources with the police department. And every time you're short, we only got 500 guys. If you go to McDonald's and they're short, they're still going to give you what you're supposed to get. I don't care if they're short. Work it out. Work it out. We had to work it out. Work it out. It's just not what they say it is. So you think having more money is going to make you do a better job? It didn't work when O'Malley was mayor. He gave him all the money in the world. The job didn't get done any better. It got done worse. All the police are looking at too much television. They all run around in cop pajamas. A cop gets out on you now, you don't even know if he is a police officer because they're all wearing the same crazy SWAT getup, and you've called them for something simple. They're trained with this mental health piece, but instead of them using that training, because they're supposed to call people and bring other people in, they don't do that. They want to do a quick fix. They don't want to write anything. They don't want to document anything. They think if they write the wrong thing, they're going to get in trouble. They're worried about everything under the sun except for what they're supposed to be worried about, human life. When that comes into play, things will get better. But I don't see it happening because having that the ability to just make up a story and make somebody believe it, all you got to say at the end of the day is, "Hey, I was scared," and then you're going to be let go. There's too many of us that are going to be killed and are going to die because of listening to that. When I get up in the morning and go outside now, I don't know what's going to kill me first, COVID or the police. And that's just how I feel about it. Are you still there?
We're still here.
Oh, okay. I lost somebody.
Yeah, I'm trying to unmute myself. I apologize.
Okay.
Yeah, that definitely was real. And if, I know you got something to do, my brother, but I wanted you real fast to meet my brother, and I see my brother analysis on, but I want to bring Ken Williams into the conversation real quick because we had a great conversation last week where we had a officer Steve Turner who's now a pastor of the church. He let the whole ball out the sack, and him and Ken did a phenomenal job of just trying to eat at this blue wall of silence. So I would like to bring in Ken really quickly. Ken, no check.
My check. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tawana. Fred Jackson, thank you for being here. Thank you for your service and stuff as well. Some of the things that I wanted to go and touch upon with respect to Mr. Jackson's service and stuff that are very important to highlight is that in his career, if you do some background check on him, in his career he also was part of the training division in policing. So when he's talking about sanctity of life, when he's talking about this aspect of fear that police officers use to justify their unreasonable use of force, typically deadly force, he's talking from not just the nuts and bolts of policing, but also from the training aspect of how he tried to indoctrinate with other police officers how they should carry themselves in the street. So they have someone in his caliber on here explaining very detail-wise how and why and where and when policing has fallen very short in communities of color is very important. I wanted to go and highlight that, that's something that really resonated with me. Another thing that resonated with me was him saying and expressing the fact that too many police officers, particularly in communities of color, brandishing a firearm, taking a firearm out of the holster, pointing it at an individual or individuals, and then what do? Once you have a firearm out, he expressed it, I just want to go and repeat what he said. What he expressed was, if you have the firearm out, great. What are you going to do with that thing now? Because if there is a situation that you have to go and, talk to someone and there's an escalation, what Mr. Jackson is saying is we're already at deadly force that's being presented, rather than, taking a moment to think about, time, distance, space, sanctity of life. We're already presenting deadly force into a situation. If anyone here has ever had a firearm pointed at them, think about that for a second, how traumatizing that is, especially if you haven't done anything. And to have it where so many black people are traumatized every single day, based on what Mr. Jackson is saying, in Baltimore, simply by having a firearm pointed at them, is something that we should not and cannot dismiss. You know, that is causing so much trauma in the streets. That is causing so much distrust in those streets, where there is this mentality, if you are pointing firearms at people willy-nilly, there is an us versus them mentality then. It's a cultural issue. And the other thing that he touched upon was residency. You know, by him in his career having to go outside his front doorstep and walk in the neighborhood that he actually patrolled and policed, it meant that he was tethered to the community, and he wanted to make sure that he respected his neighbors, you know, as a good citizen that was a police officer, and other good citizens that were his neighbors. He wanted to respect them and treat them as he would want his and his own to be treated, or himself and his own to be treated. And that's with respect. So, you know, to have a man that has had such a service, a lengthy service in law enforcement, to climb through the ranks. I believe he was a captain when he retired, based on what I saw. The captain then became, I believe, a chief at one point. To have a man of his caliber to express the fact that beyond retirement, he has had to go and grapple with the fact that what could be an honorable profession has let him down personally, to the point where he doesn't want to have many ties, many connections with it, should be something that is very telling for everybody. You know, a man of his caliber to say, you know, I had a badge, I had a gun, and I don't even know where that badge is at this point in time, because I'm so disgusted with what I'm seeing happening play out in law enforcement, should be something that people think about. And the reason why I'm saying that is because, as a former member of law enforcement, a highly decorated homicide detective who spent a career in law enforcement, I have that similar feeling, that similar taste. You know, so to hear someone else express how I feel is truly amazing.
You know, Ken, there's a lot of police officers that feel the same way we do.
Mm.
I expressed it when I was retiring. They said, "Are you going to come back? Are you going to do this again?" I said, "I can only tell you, like Tommy Lee Jones said in Men in Black, I think I've been down one bug's gullet too many." And that's exactly how I felt. I just didn't want to have anything else to do with it. It was too much. And then the other point that you were making, I thought about it just when I was listening to that intro to the meeting that the guy said his son is going through. Is one of the things I used to teach. When you get called somewhere or you go somewhere, be mindful of how you're acting. You may have seen the exact same thing, the exact same way, and I know, Ken, you know what I'm talking about.
Sure.
People say the same stuff to you all the time, and you react to it because, oh, here we go again, doing that. That's not right.
It is.
I've always told those young officers, when you go there, consider that what you do when you get there is going to color how that person thinks of the police for the rest of their lives. Because you may be the first officer that they've ever met.
That's right.
First police officer that you see, if he treats you like crap, you're going to believe all officers are like crap. If they treat you halfway decent and help you out, you're going to say, cops are pretty nice. But if you do the wrong thing, as soon as you get there, they're going to always believe you're going to do the wrong thing. And that's where they come up with that, you know, heck with the police, just not to use that colorful language. But you hear it a whole lot. And they just need to stop for a minute and think, what am I doing here? What am I trying to achieve? Do I want to achieve showing how much pain I can inflict? You can go home and inflict that pain on yourself. To go out in the streets and deliberately inflict pain on a community that you belong to is just wrong. Then what do you do when you go out and you're on your own? And you're just going out to eat somewhere, somebody's jumping on you. And you don't have a comeback for that. It's gotta be more than that. I was so glad to retire. I didn't think I was gonna make it. It was just getting that rough. But I'm telling you, it's worth it. As long as people like Tawanda, don't let the memory of these people die out, and let the police community know, yes, we're watching you, then it will stop. Eventually, I don't think it's going to ever really stop. I don't know why I'm kidding myself, because it's been going on since slavery, because the police departments were made as slave catchers.
Yeah. Exactly.
They have that kind of mentality right now.
Yeah.
Black community.
And I think it's important for us to highlight the fact that Officer Friendly, that's patrolling, a middle class neighborhood, a well-to-do neighborhood, maybe a white neighborhood, could all of a sudden become the warrior cop that's patrolling the 2 streets over, predominantly black neighborhood or minority neighborhood. So, this idea that somehow the rotten apples, the few rotten apples, it's more than a few. It's a cultural issue. It's a top-down, bottom-up issue where, for some strange reason, there are a lot of police officers that once they have that badge, that gun, that authority, they, power can go to the mind and just make a person who may have had some good moral standings before become corrupted by what they see as the norm, the acceptable norm of going out, for instance, on broad daylight, putting a knee to Mr. George Floyd's neck with citizens out there on that street saying, get your knee off his neck, you're killing that man. And for several police officers to just ignore all that and then kill that man. It's just, that happens, unfortunately, every single day in America. It happens not in the white, middle-class neighborhood America. It happens every single day in black America. And we have to go and make sure that we understand that, and that we say that, and that we correct that. And that's the reason why part of the discussion about defunding the police is very important, because, if you're not a social worker, and police officers are placed with many different hats, being a caretaker, social worker, they go out and they patrol neighborhoods and stuff like that. Some of these titles that they have, they're just not equipped to be able to do those type of jobs. Bring in professionals. Bring in someone that's a mental health professional that maybe replaces a police officer's job that goes out and deals with people who have mental health conditions. Have those folks respond to those type of calls, as long as it doesn't involve someone, having a weapon or something like that. If they do have a weapon, I suppose you can call the 911 and have another police officer, respond accordingly and stuff. Almost like the firefighters. They don't carry guns, but they respond to EMS calls all day and all night. If someone shows up at a hospital and nurses are dealing with someone that has a mental health condition, we don't have people getting choked out at hospitals, from what I understand. We have people who have lives being saved. Their lives are being saved at hospitals, even if they suffer a mental health condition. It's, this idea that police officers can respond to these type of calls and actually have a positive outcome. It's crazy. It really is.
Yeah, and I keep hearing that thing about, oh, defund the police. You're trying to get rid of them. No, we're not trying to get rid of the police. We want them to be the police.
That's right.
We don't want you to be a doctor.
That's
we don't
right.
want you to be a psychiatrist.
That's right.
We don't want you to deliver babies. But we want you to be the police. And stop.
That's right.
Why? It's just wrong. To keep
That's
running
right.
like that is just crazy. When I was a kid, I never saw a SWAT person. Never saw one. When I saw a police officer, I knew he was the police. Now, police pulled me over. They were wearing SWAT gear. I'm like, boy, something bad must have happened. No, they were looking for me because they said my windows were too dark. I said, okay. So they sent SWAT? Really?
How does that de-escalate the stop if you got SWAT right at your window, right?
I know. Oh, yeah. Oh, they were escalating it. I just kept sitting there looking at them. And I said,
That's right.
I said, look, I said, I'm gonna tell you something that I probably shouldn't tell you. What? I said, I'm a cop. So I know what you're doing isn't right. I want your license and registration. I said, you did what I said? I said, you can have my license and registration, no problem. But you better give me a piece of paper to go with it. And one of them said, look, man, he's a cop. He knows what we're doing. So stop. And that was the way. Now, had I not been a police officer, I probably would have got shot.
Exactly.
Most people don't even know that.
And that's important for us to say. It's important for us to understand that a citizen that is stopped, even just if it's a valid routine traffic stop, to have it escalate to where someone is being shot and killed. A lot of these shootings happen 15, 20 seconds into a stop. You know what I mean? We're talking 15, 20 minutes, under a minute into a stop. Someone's dead over a routine traffic stop, over a trivial, non-violent type of situation that escalated to now all of a sudden someone being shot and killed. And the fact that the internal system that protects police officers, you are a part of the CRAB board where there are so many different rights that police officers have that need to be peeled back. These layers need to be peeled back in order to have sunlight shined on these areas where police officers should not have, where their personnel records are private or considered to be private. If you're out there abusing citizens with public money, you're on the taxpayer dime. That should be public record. If you're out there and you're committing some sort of acts that require settlements and stuff like that, all of that should be public record. And there should be an early warning system that says that if a police officer is going out there, and most abuse, police abuse, starts with verbal. It goes from a simple routine traffic stop where there's a verbal exchange, and then all of a sudden the officer feels like, wait a minute, who are you talking to? Because I'm the police. And the citizen is like, I'm talking to you because I got a First Amendment right to say what I got to say, as long as I'm not threatening you. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, this thing is escalating out of control. Instead of the police officer saying, okay, I might have stepped over the line with this individual. You just shared your experience of the officer having to roll that back because he understood, wow, you know the rules. And if you know the rules, you can jam that officer up.
And that's the other thing too about that escalating. Nobody wants to de-escalate anymore. They come in like gangbusters. They stay at high volume and they keep it going. And then somebody else has got to come in and say, "Man, knock it off. Just knock it off." And it shouldn't be that way.
That's right.
It really shouldn't be that way. At this point, it's not. I'm not disrespectful of the police. And there are a lot of police officers out there that I don't respect because of the way they do their job.
Mm-hmm.
But when I got into the CRB, I kept seeing more and more of what I saw when I was working, which is you call the police, they come to you, you tell them something, and then all of a sudden you're getting locked up for calling the police.
Yeah.
Like, how are you going to keep on making victims? How are you going to keep victimizing people who've already been victimized? That's what makes it 10 times worse.
Yep.
But to me, I got to find another route to take. This is good. Keeping the conversation alive, keeping it in the public eye. But sometimes the public just isn't paying attention.
I got a question about that. Given your work on the Civilian Review Board, how do you feel about the Civilian Review Board? Now, I know how you feel about cops because you were a former cop and now you're on a Civilian Review Board. How do you feel about it? Is it effective? Is it a good tool? What could it do better and what to do well?
The Civilian Review Board, I think, is an excellent vehicle to try to tamp down the corruption in the police force. The problem is, it was written up in such a way that it had no power to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have subpoena power?
We have subpoena power, but it doesn't help. We can subpoena all day long. If they decide that they're not coming, they don't come.
Mm.
There's so much stupid stuff going on, and we're fighting that now. Now, unfortunately, like I said, after tomorrow I'll be out. But that's a battle we've been fighting here lately. Fortunately, the way some things are turning around, like in Tawanda's case, that non-disclosure thing is now starting to be wiped out. The ACLU is fighting that. They're part of the Civilian Review Board. The Civilian Review Board keeps making suggestions about doing police discipline. It never gets followed. They don't follow their own matrix. They don't do anything. And I've had to come in there and explain to them time and time again how it works. And the way the citizens think it works, it's just not the way it works. They keep giving everybody an out. In order for you to get fired from the police department, you have to really do something that's so ridiculous that they think it's ridiculous enough to fire you, because they're always offering summary punishment. They're always offering a trial board, and then the trial board, everybody's got to find you guilty. Otherwise, you're not guilty. At the end of all of that, if you do get found guilty, then the head of the agency has the option of letting you go. And those are things I had to keep explaining to them. And the police in the room would get mad because they act like I'm coming into the CRB telling them all that these guys are all wet in the bed. It's supposed to be a family secret. It's not a secret. This is the way it works. It's unfortunate that it works that way. And you know from an officer yourself that when you start off, when you're in the police academy, people are always yelling about training. These guys are trained. They're trained very well. But
Well
as
trained.
soon as they leave there, they get into police culture. And that rules the day. So there's where the problem is. If you convince these guys stop getting in with that police culture, then it was I still don't think it's going to stop until we switch to something else. But that's where a lot of this problem comes from. That's why Tyrone West died. Those guys got caught up in police culture. We got him, we're on him, we're beating him down, he's got it. We got this big guy, we're taking him in until there's no drugs, there's nothing, you have nothing. Now you got to get in a huddle and figure out how you're going to work it out. It's wrong. What happened to him was wrong. And that's why I worked so hard to try to bring it back up. But it was just not going to happen. I mean, we hit a brick wall with that. It was terrible. Terrible.
Is the city responsible? Is the city responsible for writing the rules that the CRAB board has to abide by, or does the CRAB board, have its own council to write its own rule book?
It's in the law, but there was another thing, the problem that we had before when they tried to jam all of us up. Yeah, we got a lawyer. The lawyer that we had is the same lawyer the police have.
Conflict of interest there, right?
And we fought that. And there was a big
interest there, right?
And we fought that. And there was a big deal. I mean, we really fought it. Like, no, we're going to get our own, because they were telling us something stupid. I'm trying to remember how bad it got to the point where we needed a lawyer. When they were I tell you what it was. People were complaining. They would call in and say, I have a complaint on Officer XYZ. Part of our non-disclosure thing with them, or to sign when you become part of CRB, is that you don't tell the officers' names or any of that stuff. You can't tell any of their personal stuff. But you get up there and adjudicate it. You got to do it in public. So we would say, okay, well, officer number 1, and officer number 2, or officer X or X, Y, and this, that, and the other. Well, there would be sometimes, like with the case of Keith Davis, where they came in and all of the officers were being brought up to be responsible for what happened to Keith Davis. We found them all responsible, and we found them all guilty of it, and all of us suggested that these guys be terminated. Now, what happened with that is what brought this all on. The people who put the case in, they knew the officers' names. They submitted the names. The people working at the CRB sent a letter off saying, your complaint has been sustained, that we found these officers culpable, and they want to have them fired. We're sending that over there to the police department.
As a recommendation.
Well, that's right. Well, the people that put the complaint in were so happy, they went to the news media. And they put their names out the same way Tawanda puts these other guys' names out on a regular basis. You know who they are. We can't say who they are, but you know who they are because you're a citizen. And you can talk to anybody you want. So they put these guys' names out, and the city solicitor's office threatened to sue us for putting their names out. Well, we didn't put the names out. The victims did. So they can talk. They're allowed to talk. And so when they tried to make us sign another agreement, we refused. So we already signed one. We go by it. They wanted to sign something that said, now when you come to your conclusion, you can't tell the complainant what your conclusion was. Well, that's stupid. That's not transparency. They were going to sue us.
Let's take that a step further and dissect that a little bit more. Because what you're saying is the CRAB now has to, at some point in time, the municipality is on the hook. And the attorneys for the municipality, at the end of the day, have a duty to try to protect the cops, the municipality, everybody from being sued. So they're looking at the crab as the entity that can harm that whole harmony of protecting everybody within that whole system.
Right.
That's it. That's what you're saying.
Right. Well, we never gave these guys names up. We never gave them
That's
up.
right. That's
The
right.
people who were victimized by them gave them up.
And by all means, they can do that because
And
they
they
have
went
every
and
right
said
to
it.
do so.
They went on. They got on news that day because they were at our meeting. They were outside that day and called the news media to have a meeting and say, this officer, that officer did this, and the CRB just said they should be terminated. That's what needs to be happening. We want to see some action. Nothing happened to these guys yet. And they got mad with us. They came in after us. They came at us with both feet. And we had to get an attorney. And then the attorney got sued. So, you know, the city gets deep with their stuff. I mean, because when you get to a point where your lawyer needs a lawyer, then you need a lawyer.
Right.
That's particularly what happened. And it was terrible. But we got past it. We got past it. We didn't sign it, and we kept it moving.
Wow.
Ken, I just wanted to kind of possibly give you a little pushback here, and a couple of other people saying, you know, it's like, well, we don't want to abolish police. And
No, I never said abolish
there are a
police.
lot of people on this channel who, like, I want to abolish police. I don't think I'll see it in my life, but the idea that you have a group of people in your society whose job is to commit violence on your behalf, that just tells me you have a sick society. If that's what you know, if you need that person, then you have a sickness. Now, I think that, you know, as a Christian, I believe that violence is in some ways inherent in people, that we have this problem that we're going to be some people are going to be bad. But I think that if we really start with defunding the police and taking away all these jobs like, you know, like rounding up homeless people and breaking up domestic violence and those jobs, and made the police smaller, and then took away crimes like taking drugs, and if we gave people the you know, the income and the food and made sure people had housing, and really made this a society that was good to live in, I think that little residue of what was left of just people who just don't want to get better, that's the sort of thing that could be handled by a volunteer fire department. People whose it's not their job to be policemen, but who, as service to a community, a couple days out of a month, do this job where they go around and deal with the violence. But the problem with police is this is their job. And this becomes a group, and this becomes a thing that is against society. Really, I mean, cops always, you know, it's like it's the cops and the scum, and that's, you know, that's all that counts in their view. And it's because these people are professionals at what they do. If you make it just a thing that you do now and again, and most of your life is living in the community, doing whatever it is you do in the community, then you don't get that ethos, I think. And so I want to abolish police as a job. I want to get rid of the profession of policing. And I think that that's where, you know, if that's where we point ourselves, then everything else will be obvious. And what needs to happen will be obvious. And that's what, you know, if we put ourselves in that mind and give ourselves that direction, then we won't have to argue about all this stuff. You know, is it training, or is it bad apples, or is it, you know, culture, or is it what, you know, and do you have, you know, do you send a policeman with a social worker, or do you send a social worker and have him call a policeman? All of that stuff becomes just sort of process questions working towards that end of, we want a society where there is so little cause for people to hurt each other, that we handle it with just our leftover time.
I mean, unfortunately, that utopia can't exist in America, unfortunately.
Not today.
It can't ever exist unless we think about how crime, just happens to take place. And I'm not talking about petty crime. I'm talking about major crime. When I was a detective, for instance, and there was a sex crime, a major crime. A woman was, raped. She wanted my help, and she needed my help in order to go and make sure I could go out and lock up and, bring the bad person who harmed her to court, so she could have her day in court and have a jury and a judge rule on whether or not that person was responsible for that crime. And, there needed to be a jail system in place to go and make sure that person served their punishment for committing that crime if they were found guilty. What we don't want in America is what has been, when I go back to what Mr. Jackson shared with us, it's important for us to understand that since 1619, there's been one black and one white system. Black people who were brought over here were criminalized based on the color of their skin. They didn't commit a violent act. They didn't commit a crime. Their skin color was the crime. And white people who came over here had a different set of standards. Some of them committed crimes over in Europe, and they came over here to serve their sentence here in America, working in servitude. And then once their sentence ended, they were given some money and some land, and they went on their way, and they became indoctrinated in the system that benefited white people. Black people didn't have that shared experience. There was one white, one black system. And we're still working through that history that we can't ignore today. And that's the reason why when we think about, and I tried to say it earlier, if you have the white officer or the black officer that patrols the middle class neighborhood and the upper class neighborhood, and their function in those neighborhoods doesn't involve someone having a knee put to their neck and killed on a public street corner, but yet and still those same officers can patrol a poor neighborhood, a minority neighborhood, a black neighborhood, and then turn into a judge and jury based on those conditions. We have two different systems, and we have two different outcomes based on color, based on economics, and that can't be. I mean, we're running smack dab into a wall here where, when we think about what's going on in this country, and it doesn't matter at this point if you're black or white, because there are many protesters who come in all different hues that are protesting the same thing. That's protesting police criminality and lack of accountability. The cops who were citizens that came from the neighborhoods that got elevated to these positions after being trained and raising their right hands to go and abide by a U.S. Constitution are breaking the Constitution. They're killing people, and the system that is created is helping them escape the punishment. That system is the system that black people have suffered through since 1619. So when we're talking about this penal system and we're talking about this criminal justice system, it's important for us to go and parse out. Those are two different areas. When we think about that Kerner Commission report, and it talked about the black experience where black people in this country have gone through all types of issues, but most of these flare-ups, when we talk about riots, when we talk about the chaos that comes from those riots, it always seems to systemically go back to police abuse, police misconduct against a black person. Those are things that we can't get over. Once we got out of the civil rights era, policing in America back in the 60s only had 200,000 police officers. Mr. Fred Jackson is a little older than I. He might be able to share more history about that. Since the 1968 riots, policing has become over a million soldiers out there in those streets. And how they police black neighborhoods is far different than how they police white neighborhoods. How white folks end up in the criminal justice system is different than how black folks end up in the criminal justice system. They both can use, for instance, drugs at the same rate, but somehow there's disparity in how black people end up in a criminal justice system, and white folks who use those drugs are exonerated. We have disparity in the number of white people who are subjected to, a use of force that ends up in their death, compared to it being 5 times as many minority citizens who are subjected to use of force that end up dead. And these disparities we cannot overlook. If black people shared in the same criminal justice system that white people shared in, or if white people shared in the same criminal justice system that black people shared in, we would have a serious problem in America. So we want equality. We want, and we need, and we demand equality. Defunding the cops to get there means, in some instances, we got to scale this back to the 200,000 that we had back during the civil rights era, because somehow we went through that whole entire episode in this country, and then after we achieved, the dream of opportunity and equality in 1964 going forward, somehow we went back to putting people basically in slavery that are colored, not white, but are people of color. And that is something that we have to go and stop. That systemic racist system has to be held accountable.
Yes, we're always treated differently. As black people, we're always treated differently. And 2 instances where you saw it, just blatant, was Philando Castile riding around legally, gun permit in his pocket, carrying a gun legally. Officer stops him. He says, "I do have a gun, but I do have a permit for this weapon. Let me show it to you," and gets blown away. Then you have another kid comes from another state to go someplace else to protect a building and has a rifle around his neck, and the police are coming. He puts his hands up. They go, "Oh, great!" And they give him water and keep him going. 2 days later, they pick him up because he was a white kid. He had no business being down there. That's a big problem. And I'll always look at these, and the protests are great, and what happens with them is great, but the people have to be vested in what's going on there. I had to go back to when Jay-Z wasn't famous a long time ago. I remember when he was just a guy. People liked his music. And I had to be security for one of his concerts. So he's up there, and people are jumping up and down. They're happy, and this, that, and the other, and they run the stage and all this. And all of a sudden, Jay-Z puts his hand up and says, "Hold up. I got to tell y'all something." Everybody got quiet. He said, "If y'all didn't come here with us, you got to get off the stage." And that's really what needs to happen here. All these people coming from outside to come and protest and making things worse. Peaceful protests are just that, peaceful. They're being treated like public enemy number 1. And it's not that. They're not doing that. They're speaking up because they can. And I think it's gotten to the point now, police keep thinking of themselves as warriors and not police. You're not warriors. You're the police. You're not warriors. You're not soldiers.
If you want to be a warrior, go join the Department of Defense.
Join the military. But this is not, the militarization of the police and all of that. We could go on for hours and hours and hours about how that's caused problems. But it really needs to be tamped down. People have to switch around and stop.
Absolutely. So real quick, I want to bring in my next guest, Analysis. Is he still on? Mic check?
Mic check.
Mic check.
I've
Mic check.
seen him
Sound
in the.
all right?
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, we can't see you. You got your camera off?
Should be right here.
No, we can't see you. We can't see your face. Your camera's on.
Let me figure out what's going on, because I can see me, but I don't know why. Still nothing?
Still nothing.
Can you see the camera icon at the bottom?
Yeah, I'm on. From all of my readings, I'm actually on.
There's a little triangle next to the camera icon. It gives you a few different choices. Maybe you could take a look.
But meanwhile, while he's figuring that out, I just wanted to say that he's been fighting for his nephew, Jarrell Gray, that was murdered, like literally murdered. And I just want to give him a big shout out. And not only has he been fighting, but he is like his poetry is beautiful, like it's magnificent. So I definitely asked him to come on and share something powerful with us. And as always, we definitely want to lift up his nephew, the brother Ray Moon. And if you want to talk about that, that's fine. We still can't see you, but I mean, you can feel free to go on. But I just want to let you know we definitely can't see you. And I like
Yeah,
your
I'm not.
intentions when you're reading and stuff like
I
that.
am not sure why that is the case. I actually have no idea.
I can
Uh,
see you turning your camera
I'm
on and
looking
off,
at.
but it doesn't actually change anything here.
Yeah, and I have no idea why that is the case because I'm looking at myself. Uh, and I'm trying to find any other setting that I can get a hold of
Why you don't
right
try to
quick.
hit the camera button and turn it off and then turn it back on again and see what happens?
I can see
Cause
him doing that,
on
and
my
it didn't
phone,
do anything.
oh,
Yeah, I'm not sure what's happening, but anyway, good to be here once again with the entire fam. Uh, Thank you so much to everybody who is spoken. I'm sitting here listening to these knowledgeable brothers who speak from a place of experience when they talk about the system, when they talk about policing in America. So many thoughts come to my mind. Certainly, Alex Vitale's book, The End of Policing, which I had a chance to do earlier this summer, comes very much to mind, and I highly recommend it. And Vitale really gets into this matter also of reform versus total change, reform versus abolition. So I definitely hear, um, my brother's comment and response in terms of what abolition would look like,
Your
and
camera's working
and
now.
versus what what serious good reform would look like, and as I have moved along the spectrum as I go along in life, I have moved more towards the abolitionist side. But that is not to disrespect what Brother Ken was saying in terms of what does that concretely look like. That has to be done in a way in which we do have some institution in place where serious matters can be addressed, where people can be helped in times of violence, or let's face it, if any one of us walks outside now and our car is gone, we want somebody with some detective ability to help us find it and that type of thing. But I think that for me, that comes more and more in the context of kind of deconstructing the whole thing that exists and building something new in place, where we have that bare the minimal amount of people trained and forced to deal with the occasional wild situations, that occasional sniper at the school or that type of thing. But the vast majority of it gets transformed into, as people have been saying tonight, public health, trained people, and social workers and other folk other than what we now know as police to deal with those situations. And I certainly hear both of the brothers when they're talking about the lack of de-escalation and the lack of even a desire to come with a de-escalation framework on the part of many of these officers. When you look at my nephew's case, and I won't go through the entire story now for sake of time. We talked about it before, but when my nephew was killed in Frederick in '07, that was a clear case of an officer coming in with no mindset of de-escalation, but a mindset to draw weaponry first. And so you had a deputy that responded to a noise complaint as my nephew and his other friend were being too loud in the morning and arguing in the morning, and you have a deputy coming in and drawing a firearm, drawing a taser, instead of coming in and trying to de-escalate and saying, "Hey, fellas, why are you making this noise? It's 5 in the morning. Get in the house. Come on, let's go." Um, so that is a clear example of the lack of de-escalation. And as Brother Jackson said, the weapon is out. That is going to lead to it being misused if it's out in the wrong situation and if it's out for no reason, no good reason in the first place. And sure enough, the taser was out, and this deputy got caught in fear and loathing and adrenaline or whatever he may have gotten caught in, and fired that taser on my nephew, and then of course extremely egregiously fired a second shot even after my nephew was down. So that firearm had no reason to be drawn in the first place. So, I underline all of that in terms of this sick lack of uh, uh, lack of desire to de-escalate first. Um, Tuan invited me to come on tonight, especially under the context of all of this that is going on and all of the pressure and the mental health challenges that our oppression as an African diaspora uh, uh, at the hands of the oppressors can cause us. And Tuan, this friend, dear sister, spoke to it at the beginning of our evening, the need for our own self-care and our own mental health. Um, since I was last on, God help us, so much has happened in terms of what's been happening in Portland, people being snatched off the street, into federal vans into Portland, protesters being killed in Portland and elsewhere, and that type of thing has already been commented on. And then even this week, uh, we have, very interestingly enough, the settlement that the family of Breonna Taylor in Kentucky has come to, a $12 million settlement, which still does not have the officers that killed Breonna prosecuted. And Michael Denzel Smith, Professor Michael Denzel Smith, was on Democracy Now! This morning and making a very good point that we need not let our foot off the gas pedal in terms of Breonna's situation and other situations, because while the monetary settlement for the family is indeed good, we can't let the system hide behind monetary settlements, which it would be tempted to do. I mean, the system has money. They can pay out money, especially if they think it's going to buy their ability to get away with anything that they want to get away with. And so, my family, my sister and her legal team pursued a civil suit. There was no criminal suit, unfortunately, that could be brought as part of the evil of the system. And they pursued a civil suit and unfortunately got ruled against on all 7 counts. So I'm happy for Breonna's family in terms of the settlement, but I think they know, and we all know, that has to be more than monetary settlement to deconstruct policing and to change the system. But say all of that just to get into some poetry. Twanda invited me on to kind of bring something that would just help our state of mind and mental health. And so this next poem that I'll do has actually nothing specifically to do with our subject matters today, not specifically in terms of policing, in terms of police killings. But it is still in some way generally related, because I'm about to talk about a woman who is very dear and special to me, who managed to live to be 90-something in a very racist society. And so that really is what we're talking about, our ability to live through a very oppressive and racist society. And she is someone that was very dear to me, and I feel myself very fortunate and very blessed to have overlapped in years with her. And so I will offer you this just to kind of hopefully bring a smile to your face and a smile to your soul, even in the midst of these trying times. Her name was Alice Louise Miller Burnett Rogers Prince, but I just called her Nan. And it would be a long time before I'd understand how privileged I am to have grown into adult years with my great-grandmother at hand. And even through adult tears I shed at missing her, I know I stand better prepared to face adult fears by remembering how she held my hand. Long hair, beautifully black in its grayness, and features that testified to the mix of vocabulary and Turtle Island that our heritage wove into her. This always intrigued me, always resonated with me, such that my alliance in later years came as naturally to me as the escape routes how people ran to native lands. Born in the last year of the 19th, not far removed from slavery's maze, I was amazed. I'd say, Nan, you were born in the olden days, and she'd just pat me on the arm and laugh at how tickled I got at things. Guess I'm not far removed from things myself. I found myself in loving awe at being in the presence of living history, feeling connected to the ancestors in ways I could not fully understand, and yet my spirit embraced this mystery. Moved from Brooklyn to Baltimore so her teen mother granddaughter could continue to be more and proceed with her higher learning while her daughter did the earning and she helped take care of the child. All the while, during these formative times, I was surrounded by 3 generations, wrapping me like warm blankets, layering love and lessons on me I so often find lamentably lacking in little ones and youth today. I'd go down home with her to North Carolina, or ride the train to Kentucky. Didn't know how lucky I was that my world was more than just the hood, and thus my worldview was more of what it should be, letting a young black kid know that he, indeed, could be. Laying on her bed and playing with toys as she rocked in her chair and watched the stories. I know some of y'all know what the stories are. That's what the old folk used to call all the soap operas. We used to, sit around and watch all day. Laying on her bed and playing with toys as she rocked in her chair and watched the stories. Listening to her was to be lifted back in time to that little one-room schoolhouse where she taught reading, writing, and arithmetic, making sure something would stick in the heads of black children as she helped raise the village around her, as well as make sure her own family would rise. My eyes filled with wonder at stories of a farm horse named Dapper Dan. They filled with sorrow when she spoke of a son who drowned as a young man. I can remember the sadness in her voice when she said, "It's not right that a mother should outlive her child." I look at old photos which are new to me each time. I travel time and see her beauty, accompanied by a stern look which used to stir my curiosity. I'd say, how can this possibly be? How can this hardened one be the sweet man that helped raise me? That recited songs, listened to me read gospel stories, watched me draw, let me help cook, and took over as I looked fascinated that the pop of the hot grease didn't bother her at all. Took me to the park. Watched me dance around the room acting crazy like the people on TV. Made snow cones with me, fixed me tea, made sure I was safe as could be, and so I'd wonder what's wrong with this picture. Until I realized that nothing was wrong with this picture. Realized she had to be a strong fixture for her family while enduring the poisonous mixture of classism, racism, and sexism all prevalent in society. That solemn strength was the sobriety needed to get her family through a world drunk with the lynching of black bodies and souls. Her soul's devotion gave her kinfolk the substance of hope and fostered a faith that was evidenced in a love seen and felt by all who were around it. I'm actually astounded that she could survive nearly a century of this sick, so-called civilization and still be as sane and kind and caring as she was, even while scrubbing too many white women's floors, walking through too many back doors, working so that doors would be open for her children. Precious progeny, brought forth with a man named John Henry Rogers, a man I am decades removed from ever having known, yet never shall I intone his name in quiet reverence for the great and grandfather he must have been. My child's mind would intertwine him and the folk legend by the similar name. Indeed, they would both hammer out a life for their families, because our John Henry also worked hard until his death of TB, a poor man's disease that robbed Alice of her beloved after too few seasons. Yet she continued to be strong for her family, and thus her family became strong. Their birthstones embedded in her ring, she cherished her children and kept them ever in her thoughts and prayers. She was the matriarch who guided the ark of her heirs, and throughout my years I was surrounded by pillars of love. My soul stands tall as I call their names like the tribes of Israel. Always this story I'll tell, for they will always be my chosen generation. With pride I say them, summoning ancestral strength as I sound their names. John Henry Jr., Allison Ephraim, James Thaddeus, Edna Louise, Lillian Lucille, George Franklin. Together they forged a rank in which I always had elders to look up to. I always said I would sit them down, write their bios. Funny how you wake up one day and they're gone, your holy historical task having been procrastinated on one lifetime too long, and that is something I shall eternally regret. Yet, let me not regress into stagnant self-pity. Let me and the others teach the young ones on how they're part of a lineage proud. Let's share stories and glories and remembrances aloud. This legacy is my leverage to live, and so let me live out the lessons learned and use the wisdom earned to overcome the mind's and soul's illness. I can have no excuses because I have no lack of example from which to sample strength of spirit, inspirited by their encouragement, and nurtured by one who exuded faith unwavering, kindness unfailing. When I feel myself ailing, I can hear her voice singing, and the verses of my years with her come back to me like a trusted hymn. She'll always be there, as she was in my grandmother's time, and in my mother's, and in mine, and will be in times to come. Like the African violets she so loved, she was royal grace and black beauty in the form of an ever-present peaceful presence, and she is present with me. Yea, I am convinced that nothing can separate me from the love of that God-sent soul who helped define my very life. So even in the midst of the strife, I can still myself and still feel myself comforted by my great-grandmother's hand. Her name was Alice Louise Miller Burnett Rogers Prince, but I just called her Nan.
Wow, that was amazing. Oh my God. I got goosebumps. That was jazz. Woo.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you so much.
you. That was amazing. Yes.
And you should know right before
you
you started the poem, the camera came on, so everything got recorded.
Oh, did it?
Yes, it did.
I had no idea it was on. That's hilarious. I actually had no idea it was on. Well, good. Well, I'm glad. Certainly, the audio, most importantly, came through in the video also. But I appreciate your sharing in that with me. I live in what was my grandparents' house, so I speak to you from the place where so many of those memories were made with grandparents and with my great grandmother. So that's called Nan.
I love it. That was so fitting and beautiful. Like it was like, oh my God, like yes. Like I can't even say nothing else. Like it's just it was a beautiful. Yes.
Thank you so much.
So
Hopefully it's a bit of a breather in the midst of the constant pain and the constant pressure.
Yes. Now I see why they call you Analysis. Write your name because you definitely summed that up. That was oh my goodness, wow. Yes.
Thank you so much.
So moving right on for time's sake, do we have any horrible names for our sad list with so many homicides that's been taking place over the past week or two? It's just been really sad. Over 58 shootings and over a dozen murders. This is utterly ridiculous. So do we have the list?
I can just say about the other list. I'm sorry, Brian. The other
Yeah,
list.
no, I'm here. I'm sorry. I'm trying to. I'm having to run back and forth because my son and projects we got going on here. So yeah, I have the list for today, and this one is it's a long list, and a particularly sad list, and you know we're here in a violent world, and we struggle against that violence in each in our own way and each with our own final goal. But this week, the losses: Kenneth Bivens, 27.
Kenneth Bivens, 27.
Kenneth Bivens.
Dominic Randall, 29.
Dominic Randall, 29.
Dominic Randall, 29.
Tyqueon Jones,
Tyqueon
14.
Jones, 14.
Tyqueon Jones, 14.
Caleb Shaw, 1.
Caleb Shaw, 1.
Caleb Shaw, 1.
Dominique Whitby, 24.
Dominic Whitby.
Dominic Whitby, 24.
Dion Jenkins, 24.
Dion Jenkins,
Young
24.
Young Jenkins, 24.
Malik Georges, 21.
Malik
George,
George,
21.
Taiwan Rounds, 19.
Taiwan Rounds.
Rounds, 19.
M.A. McLean, 20.
Amy McLean.
McLean,
20.
DeAndre Davis, 31.
DeAndre
31.
Shaheed Carter, 37.
Shaheed
Carter,
37.
Troy Poindexter, 41.
Troy Poindexter.
Troy
Poindexter.
41.
Thank you.
Ashe.
Ashe.
And my heart and my prayers goes out to the families. It's just that anytime you actually hear a 1-year-old on there, a 14-year-old baby, and just any age, it's just horrible for someone's life to be snatched away, murdered, murdered. No one deserves to be murdered, and it's just way too much. So my heart goes out. So even though you're hearing the names, don't wait till one of your loved one name is on that unfortunate list before we actually take action and demand that these people that are supposed to do their job in high positions to make sure that everybody has that, the pursuit of happiness, what life is about. Everyone deserves that. Why is it in certain communities that certain people are just able to just get murdered and then we just read off their name? It's sickening to me. So thanks for that horrible list. And Uncle Bill, do you have a list this week?
No, the list of people killed around the country by police has not been updated in the last week. So we were up to the most recent people who've been mentioned, who were lost, have already had their names uplifted here last week. I'd like to mention a few other things. The first is that those of us that are active with West Wednesday made a decision to focus at the moment on calling for the prosecution of Bernardez Ruiz, the Baltimore City cop who, as far as we know, has been involved in at least 6 cases of brutality, racial profiling, and murder. And so if you have not yet sent a letter, we've sent, I think, altogether about 50 letters to Marilyn Mosby calling for his prosecution. And if you haven't sent one yet, wherever you're watching this West Wednesday streaming, probably the same person on their social media site probably has listed how to do the letter, and it'd be great if you could send one also. So we're going to continue with that campaign. Secondly, I wanted to mention that I think that Ken Williams is absolutely correct that racism is at the heart of the most severe problems we see in the United States and around the world. W.E.B. Du Bois said that the main question of the 20th century is the race question, and unfortunately it remains the main question of the 21st century also. I remember after Rodney King was beaten severely in Los Angeles, they did a study of the informal conversations from patrol car to patrol car between police, just to figure out if there was a pervasive racist mindset among the police there. And they listened at random to 300 hours of these conversations and said, yes, the racism in their attitudes was overwhelming. But I think it's not just a question of the police culture, and it's not just a question of the individual racist attitudes that many of the police have. I think it's also a broader societal question. For example, if we think back to the early period of the pandemic, you remember Amazon on Staten Island had an outbreak of COVID in their warehouse. And one of the workers there, if I remember correctly, refused to go to work, and I think he got fired, and they organized a strike. So in a situation like that, if the owner of Amazon calls the police and says, we have an injunction from the court, we want you to stop them from picketing outside, the police will be there as a major presence to back up the needs of that major capitalist institution, which is Amazon. But if a worker went to the police and said, we want you to arrest the head of this company because they're causing the death of people because they won't sanitize, they won't let us go for 3 days if some positive case comes out where a person's been active and seeing other people at the plant, at the warehouse, the police would laugh at us if we said we want you to arrest the owner of the company for murder. And so we also have, in addition to racism, in addition to the culture of police, we also have the problem that the police have as their job serving the needs of the wealthy and the rich, and take their marching orders from them. And I think that's another aspect of the problem. It's Douglas once said, Frederick Douglass, he said, a man can carve out his circumstances, but the circumstances also carve out the man. That is to say, you go into a position like being a police officer, even if you go in with a good heart, the requirements of that position and upholding the private property of the rich and the wealth of the rich and looking out for them, I think will change you. Fortunately, the two gentlemen on the program today, it didn't have that effect on them, but it has that effect on many people. And the last thing I wanted to mention was I'm a member of the Progressive Labor Party. It's a revolutionary communist party. And once a month, we have a political discussion. Tonight, after West Wednesday, we'll be talking about the dirty secret of capitalist economics and how the rich get rich and how they refuse to pay the working class all the value we create and how that works exactly. So that'll be tonight at 8:30. And you could message me on Facebook if you haven't previously been and would like to join in. It'd be nice to have you. So that's all I wanted to say this evening.
Thank you, Uncle Bill. So, before we wrap out, close out, do anybody else want to mention anything that we might haven't covered yet?
I wanted to mention something, Tawanda.
Yes, go ahead.
So there's a young man in my neighborhood. He goes by Rem or Remington, and he on the 5th of September was riding a dirt bike a street up from me on Frederick Road, and a police officer in a squad car was parked on the side of the road, and he checked his mirrors, waited for the young man to be right next to him, and then drove his car out into the middle of the street, hit the young man, sent him flying, and caused him injuries. And the reason why we know all this is because the young man went to the store that the cop car was parked in front of and got the tape and posted it on Instagram. You can actually see the cop check his mirrors, turn the wheel over, and then step on the gas right when the young man was passing by. And so far, nothing has been done whatsoever. It's a week and a half ago now. No news outlet has even picked it up. None of the local news, nobody has even touched it because police violence in Baltimore is just so run of the mill. He wasn't killed, he didn't die. But like it's clear evidence of just overreach and just antagonism to the people in the neighborhood. And with your permission, I'd like to play that video on my screen right now. Y'all won't be able to see it in the meeting, but people on the live stream will be able to see it if you like.
Yes. And then also, I'm going to reach out this week to my media. So give me that person information when we get off, and we'll make sure that story definitely gets covered.
I got you. His Instagram handle is gg.ablock.
One other comment real quick. Using a police vehicle to strike somebody, they're basically using the vehicle as a weapon.
Yes.
So it's actually a use of force. And sometimes police using a vehicle to strike people, that can be use of deadly force. You should highlight the fact that it's a use of force situation.
Good point. Thank you. And if anybody wants to see this Instagram video, he only has 6 Instagram posts on his whole account. If you go on Instagram and search for gg.ablock, ABLOCK, you'll find his account and you can watch the video for yourself. And I'm going to play it now. As you can see, the cop car is up in the upper left-hand corner. You can see him start to pull out and then hit the guy on the bike. Kid goes flying. Cop car puts his squad car in park, gets out of the car, and starts running after the kid. And that's the extent of the video. That's it. But
you know, let's break that down for a second.
Mhm.
The officer, at some point in time, I take it that he must catch up with the person, right?
I'm not sure that he caught him or not. The young man who was hit actually did post a close-up picture of the officer. I'm not sure if he took the photo himself or if one of his friends did, but he did identify the officer and post a picture of him on his Instagram, and he has that as his 5th photo.
I mean, the reason why I'm raising it is a, you know, just part of the narrative. If you use your car and accidentally strike somebody, what do? You put it in park, you get it out, and you say, "Oh my God, are you okay?" Right?
That's what you would
That's
normally
typically
do.
what happens if it's an accident, right? So for there to be a foot chase after somebody is just odd immediately after there's an accident. If it's an accident and there's not this immediate, oh, let me put on my lights and check out what's going on here,
Mm-hmm.
that's something that I would really be interested in understanding the deliberate nature of it. The intent
Mm-hmm.
is based on what's in that video. Because the officer's probably going to say, hey, it was an accident.
Right.
But in the video, if the actions are showing intent,
Mm-hmm.
that raises it to a criminal action, right?
Yep. And the young man actually
Possibly. I don't know what the police officer had in his mind at the time because I haven't seen the video.
Right.
But I'm trying to go and understand better without seeing anything. But those are the things that I would start asking.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, the young man, when he posted the video, he posted a close-up that you could see the cop at his steering wheel, checking his mirror, waiting for the motorcycle to be next to him to the point where he could turn out. This happened on September 5th.
So then there has to be a police report, I would think, regarding whatever happened. He needs to. It sounds like the young man needs to get an attorney, and get the records from the police department as far as what occurred, to see what the officer may or may not have even written,
Mm-hmm.
and take that case forward. I mean, at this point, he doesn't even understand whether or not the police officer might have charged Joe Blow citizen with some sort of crime that he didn't commit. There's a lot of open-ended questions there that need to be filled. But it sounds like he needs an attorney to help him get some of those answers.
I'd agree.
Absolutely. And thank you, Ben, for sharing that with us. And make sure you share his information with me because I might have an attorney as well as I'm definitely going to get her media coverage this week. Definitely, I'm going to be working on that first thing in the morning.
Sure. And I know him personally. Like, he hangs out on the corner outside my house. He's a great kid. Just rides dirt bikes all the time. That's pretty much all he does.
Yeah, I mean, tell him he needs to get an attorney. I mean, seriously.
I will.
And I got one in mind for him too that handles police brutality, because that was reckless. Like anybody could see that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just glad something if he has the video. So yeah, thank goodness for the video. So, and thank you for sharing that. But do anybody else want to share anything before we wrap it up? All right. Well, first of all, my heart and prayers goes out to every and anybody that's going through something right now. Whether it's all these homicides that are happening in our community, down to police brutality, just down to your money being funny and your change being strange, just down to anything, personal relationship, trauma is trauma. So my heart goes out to you, and if there's anything that I can do to help you out, I'm here. I'm only a phone call away. And I just want to thank all my special guests. I want to thank my friend Kara for actually sharing the counseling piece, and that was very important. I also want to thank Fred Jackson for basically just being the type of brother that he is, and he shared really good stuff, as well as Ken Williams, who's always brings the flame. And then I also want to thank Analysis because that poem just did it for me. Like it touched on everything. And I just want to thank each and every one of the West Coalition members and just everybody for watching their time. I want to thank you, Ben, for always being the man before and after and behind everything. So I just want to thank each and every last one of you guys. And I just want to also mention that if you heard, when you heard um, the name Keith Davis Jr. being mentioned. And as you can see, that the Surveying Review Board definitely wanted those officers involved in Keith Davis Jr. fired, in which they should have been, but no one's fired. In fact, Andre Davis, and I'm going to say Andre Davis, who I call another Wizard of Oz. It's like I call Al Sharpton the Wizard of Oz. We have Wizard of Oz all in our cities, all around the world, everywhere. And he basically stop that. He is the mastermind for the foolishness. And it just needs to stop. And it's just sad that me looking at Keith Davis Jr. trial and the way they just making up stuff and constantly getting away with foolishness. This man is going on like just rotting away where those officers should be rotting that did this stuff to Keith Davis Jr. Instead of them admitting, hey, we were wrong, we're gonna hold ourselves accountable. No, they rather bury an innocent man alive. So I said also say that all victims of police brutality unfortunately don't die. Abdul Salam is a witness that they don't die. He can bear witness and say, okay, I was abused, but thank God I survived. Darrell Harris, he survived. You know, my sister Adina, she survived. And my heart goes out to her this week. She's been suffering, you know, just thinking about reliving the anniversary, the commemoration of something horrible that took place in a place, your home. Just imagine you're in your home, you're sitting where it's safe at, and then animals walk in and terrorize and just treat you like trash. It's just, it's real. This pain is real, but again, we must hold each other up, and more so, we must hold these folks accountable. As you notice, they're quick to write a check. Their answer is, let's write a check and send the family on the way. And you notice with Breonna Taylor, quickly to pull out a checkbook, multi-million dollar lawsuit. But guess what? None of that blood money is bringing Breonna Taylor back. None of that blood money is making her family happy. They need to, as fast as they wrote that goddamn check, they need to hurry up and convict and indict and put these killer cops in jail. Put them away. They come in somebody's house and murder them. Murder them. A checkbook is not the answer. They could take that checkbook and shove it where the sun don't shine. And on that note, before I get hostile, because you know I like to leave in a loving fashion, the way I like to come open in a loving fashion, I'm just going to stop. But again, I just want to thank each and every last one of you guys for your time. Always remember, live to love, love to live, and I love you guys all, and we will see you again next week. And just remember, let's keep each other safe. Let's do anything. And a big shout out to the Hellerback family who's always on top of everything that we're going through with just, you know, setting the email list up and just doing all the wonderful work they're doing. Shout out to Uncle Bill was tirelessly putting this video together. Shout out to each and every last person on here. I love you guys. Shout out just to, you know, all of us just putting in our time because guess what? This is a day that we never seen. And unfortunately, it's a day that we will never see again, but it's all about making each day count and giving it its best. Thank you guys. So I guess Ben is going to take us out with another small part of the video that Uncle Bill has started making. So we're going to close out, but just keep your eyes because this video is very powerful. And once we have it in its entirety, we will be more than glad to share with you. And please make sure you keep sending those letters to Marilyn Mosey office demanding that Ruiz be fired and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, not just for the previous victims, but for all of the victims, mainly include my brother Tyron West, because my brother unfortunately can't sit back on a couch and say, oh my God, he brutalized my brother. He took something from my family he could never give us back. Never give us back. He took a father, he took my best friend, he took my everything away from me. Now it's time that I return the goddamn favor. I want him in a cell block and I want him in there ASAP. And I hope he's watching this. And as sure as I want him, I want each and every last one of those killers that did something to Tyrone West. I want them held accountable. And not just for Tyrone West, Anthony Anderson, who we're coming up on his commemoration. they need to be held accountable. So again, thank you guys. Live to love to live. I love you all. Mic check.
Mike, check.
Mic check and good night, everybody.
Mic check.
Mike check.
Mike check.
And remember, we can't stop, we won't stop until these killer cops are in cell blocks. We're more than hashtags and body bags. We're more than being 6 feet in the dirt and pictures and buttons on t-shirts. Our lives matter. And that goes with the homicides to all the stuff that we are facing as human beings. It needs to stop. Thank you guys.
They tore open the groceries, threw the groceries throughout the car, went through the glove compartment and other pockets of the car, and just kind of like threw unnecessarily threw and destroyed the van. And at this time, if you could imagine, Amir is 3 years old and he's in the middle row in the passenger side behind the front seat, in the middle seat, bucket seat, strapped in, and he's crying helplessly as he can hear the experience of me being brutalized, as well as he's just seeing these two big grown men with guns drawn approach the car and just kind of like destroy the vehicle while he's in it, helplessly. After Ruiz decided to stop destroying the van, I guess there was nothing else to tear up, and of course there was nothing in it to find and seize, as these are narcotic cops, plain clothes cops, right? So once we leaves the van, at this time I'm on the alley ground, and the officer Omen had decided to pick me up by my feet, and while I'm upside down, handcuffed, I kind of look up in the air, and I asked Ruiz, I say, "Are you gonna let him do this to me?" And unbeknownst to me, ignorant of me, naive of me, he was the only brown officer there. So my naivety thought, to ask him, are you gonna let this type of terrorization continue? He just kind of looked and scoffed me off, and they proceeded to drop me on my head, hog tie me, and immediately when I fell on my head, Ruiz dropped on the back of my head and neck area, if you will, face first on the ground, in a wrestling type of action, and kind of hit his knee against my neck and head area. I'm, dazed, scared for my life at the time. Of course, these are all on the cusp of the Trayvon Martin case, and he's in litigation and court and things of this sort. My son's in the van. They hog time and they haul me off, and I can remember as clear as day. Once I was in the paddy wagon, and the paddy wagon navigated throughout Northeast Baltimore to make at least 2 more stops. Some of the other civilians that entered and boarded the paddy wagon, asked me. They could see what had happened. What happened to you? What's going on? And I explained what happened and described who did this, and the other gentleman, in disgust, immediately told me who these officers were. They had a reputation, and which even was more disappointing and disgusting to me, because as a civilian, taxpaying civilian, community advocate, why would this be something that you would perform on myself? and even more in question, what will give you the right and the audacity to carry this type of terrorization out in front of my 3-year-old son, right? So, the gentleman on the paddy wagon in total disgust, we got to Northeast District, and the driver of the paddy wagon also, you know, at the officer, you know, gave me a moment of empathy and, you know, asked what happened and what did I pull up to? What was all of that, you know, how did this happen? And I described to him what happened, and he told me I was preaching to the choir, and, you know, how he knew the reputation of these 3 officers. So he immediately, after explaining to him the story, went maybe 20 paces to talk to another officer in the back of the Northeast District and explain to him what had taken place as well. And this officer, I could hear him, I couldn't see him, but I believe from the tone of his voice, and cadence of his voice, he was a white officer. And after hearing what had happened, he immediately says, "Are you fucking kidding me? Again?" And these last pieces of the story are parts that it took me years to understand were a significant part of the story, because these pieces of the story depict and are vivid and genuine accounts of the credibility and or the character, speaks to the character of these officers. So that's our family's unfortunate experience with Officer Ruiz, his partners, and sadly enough to say that we've learned since these many terrorizations of Ruiz that he's been promoted as all 3 of the officers. But once again, this is not to any surprise to myself or any other individuals that are part of the fight that we know of in Baltimore. And, you know, if you're part of our coalition, if you're part of our inner circle, our grassroots organization, we know that there's been a strong pattern in practice, misleadership, misguidance, and reassurance of mispolicing the community. So we will continue to fight. We will continue to advocate. We will continue to have legislation change. We will continue to lead the nation when it comes to this narrative.